Hi guys, so today's video is going to be my October TBR. If you watched my fall TBR where I go over everything I want to read this quarter, some of these books are going to look very familiar, and I honestly think that this might be the most excited I've been for a TBR all year. I'm of course always excited to pick up the books that are on my TBR. That's the whole reason they're on my TBR. But these ones I'm just so excited for. Most of the books for this TBR are fantasy, but I'm going to start with one that is not, and that would be the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slang Vampires. Just the title alone makes me really excited for this book. I don't normally pick up mystery, thriller, horror, those sorts of books from those genres very often, but when I do, I am always excited for it because I love the emotional reactions that you can have reading a book, and anything that is creepy and mysterious obviously usually evokes that. And I'm pretty sure this one's supposed to be pretty funny and maybe even a little bit mocking of the genre, and I'm so excited for it. I've heard pretty much nothing but good things about it, that it's just a great time, perfect book to read for Halloween. That's why I'm picking it up in October. Apparently this author also has a book called My Best Friend's Exorcism, and so I'm curious if you've read that one, what your thoughts were on it. I feel like if this one didn't give away that the author is maybe a little trollolol, that one also probably gives some of that away. I'm hoping I really love it because I like it when authors do that, so I'm excited. I can't wait. I feel like it's gonna be like one of those horror movies that's also cheesy at the same time, like really over the top with the violence and the acting is purposefully terrible and stuff. That's what I'm hoping I'm gonna get, but in book form with that book. Sticking with the non-fantasy books that are on this TBR, The Nightingale. I have heard nothing but fantastic things about this book. It's a World War II story. It follows these two sisters. And you know what? I'm gonna be really honest here. It's not that I dislike World War historical fiction stories. Historical fiction, I've always said, is my second favorite genre after fantasy, but I usually like historical fiction that takes place before guns because it feels like fantasy, because it's hard to believe that that was at any point ever our world. I mean, I know it was, but it's still so far removed from our experiences now that it feels like a fantasy book. Plus, a lot of fantasy books are rooted in certain time periods throughout history. So that's part of the reason I love historical fiction so much. But I still like historical fiction that follows World War stories. But I feel like everybody who reads historical fiction, they're always reading stories that follow this time period. And I don't necessarily. I read All the Light We Cannot See, and while I thought it was a fantastic book, there were some things about it that made it so I hate to say I didn't enjoy it because of the subject matter, not exactly something that I'm like, I wasn't as entertained about this horrific event in history as I wanted to be. That's not really the goal. But as far as like, I think you understand what I'm saying. The getting something from the book factor, it didn't quite hit the way I was hoping. I'm really hoping this one does. Everybody says, get the tissues ready. This book is so emotional. This book is so good. At the beginning of the year, I had an entire list of books that were going to be buddy reads. And obviously, as many of you know, my personal life kind of was turned upside down and was tragic. So I haven't been as on top of those as I would like. And by that, I mean I haven't really participated, and I'm very sorry. But I am excited because I'm kind of doing an unofficial buddy read with Elantris. So The Nightingale was on that list from the beginning of the year for October's buddy read. And then this one I am buddy reading with Jessie from the channel Jessie May. She is so lovely and delightful and precious. And we're going to be buddy reading this one. It is a reread for me, but it is the Sanderson book that I probably remember the least about. And since Rhythm of War is coming out in November, what I would like to do is I have a previous video where I ranked my feelings about the Cosmere books from least favorite to favorite, and I want to reread Elantris since it's not as vivid in my memory, read Rhythm of War, and then kind of see if I still feel the same as I used to about where I rank the Cosmere. Plus, I just want to reread this one in general because I feel like I missed out. I feel like I just did not And you know why? I'll tell you. And I feel really bad saying this, but usually the audiobooks for the Cosmere books are amazing. I love Michael Kramer. I love the woman who did Warbreaker as well. I think her audiobook voice is fantastic. I didn't necessarily care for the narrator who narrated Elantris, and I had gone back and forth between the audiobook and the physical, and every time I listened to the audiobook, I feel like my brain was like, because it sounded kind of like a game show host a little bit. Regardless, this time around, I'm not going to listen to the audiobook at all. I'm just only going to stick to physical copy, and Jesse and I are going to be chatting about this one over on Byzance, who is sponsoring this video. Byzance is a designated buddy reading app, and it's also a nice way to keep track of the books that you are wanting to read, books that you have read. So it's kind of like, in my opinion, the best parts about Goodreads, because I've never really been a fan of Goodreads. I think there's too many functions, it's too chaotic, it's too messy. So it's nice that Byzance has a very distinct purpose in that it's designed to chat with other people who have either read the book, want to read the book, or are currently reading. So there's different chat rooms depending on what you select for where you are in your reading of that book, which I really like, and it's a great way to avoid spoilers, and I just think it's a fantastic app for buddy reading. So Jesse and I are going to be hanging out with you guys over there when we're reading Elantris, and I'll try to check in and see if anybody is also picking up the Nightingale. Next up, we have There Will Come a Darkness, and this is one I don't know a ton about. I saw that it was originally compared to Six of Crows, but I'm sure most of you know who Cindy is from Read with Cindy. She did read this and personally didn't seem to think that there were that many connections, aside from the fact that there are a lot of different point of views. But I'm okay with it not being totally the same as Six of Crows, and I also do love a multiple point of view story that has more than just one or two point of views. I have heard some people say that it's not necessarily as emotional because of the comparisons to Six of Crows, that there's not as much emotional pull as you might get from that duology, but that there are lots of twists and turns. And I'm excited for that. I think that with some of the more serious books I'm reading, the adult fantasy I'm reading, well, the Slang Vampires one isn't exactly serious, but I think Elantris is a slightly more formal writing style, especially for Sanderson, and I also think that The Nightingale is going to be a heavier read. So something like this, I think that's more fun, and you have lots of twists and turns and plot reveals that you're like, what? I think that that'll be a nice break with everything else. Last book on my TBR would be Priory of the Orange Tree. Look at how chunky this girl is, my goodness, but it's still floppy, and I always love a good floppy paperback. But I have wanted to read this for a while. I've heard that it's fairly political, and I do really like political fantasy. The complaints I've heard is that it's a fantasy standalone, and obviously it's really big, and some people feel it could have been split into a duology, and then you could have fleshed out some things more. But at the same time, I'm excited to pick up a fantasy standalone that's adult fantasy, because I feel most of the time the standalones I end up seeing are in young adult, which I like young adult as well, but it'll be nice to pick up one that is adult. This is a book my friend Jade from Bedtime Bookworm really liked, and October is the month of her birthday, so I like to read some of my friends' favorite books for their birthdays. So I've picked this one up. It's chunky, and I gotta say, not to sound like a snob, like, oh, it's not even that long, but it's definitely long. But I would think that it was longer. It's 804 pages, which that's a beefy girl. But given how giant it looks, like, let me grab Oathbringer off the shelf. Oathbringer is over 1,000 pages, and Priory looks, am I crazy? Priory looks bigger than Oathbringer. Not that it matters, but I'm just saying, even though this book looks like a monster of a book, and it is definitely a monster of a book, when I first saw it, thought it was bigger than it is. And I'm kind of relieved that it's not over 1,000 pages. I may or may not have a mystery pick on my TBR this month. I haven't quite decided. And I did this last month. I had my husband go in the other space that I sometimes film in, where I have books turned around. And I have them turned around on purpose so that occasionally I can have a mystery pick where we pull it off the shelf, kind of like when people wrap their books up, so then it's a surprise. So I might have a book on this list from doing that, but I also have a lot of catching up to do, because the last quarter is when things got really, really, really challenging in my personal life, and I just didn't have the time to read as much, but I still want to read the books that were on those TBRs. I don't want to always feel like I'm catching up. At some point, I would like to feel like I'm caught up and then I don't stress and always feel behind. So that's why I only have 5 books, which I'm not even complaining and saying like, that's nothing or anything. 5 books in a month is still a decent amount, but I have a decent amount of free time. So I just feel like 5 books for me is definitely doable. I don't know if I want to add the mystery pick. I definitely want to allow myself a little flexibility, a little bit of a buffer to catch up on some books that I haven't gotten around to yet from previous months. So in case you're wondering about that, that's just kind of some info for you. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. Definitely check out Jesse's channel, check out Jade's channel, and check out Byzance if you want to do the buddy read. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later.